The piercing sound of shattering glass echoed through the dusty streets of Sweetwater Springs, drawing the attention of every patron in the Frontier Saloon as Rebecca Patterson stood there, mortified, amidst the remains of a whiskey bottle she'd accidentally knocked over while delivering fresh linens. Clumsy old maid. At 35, you're more likely to break a hip than find a husband. Mabel Turner cackled from behind the bar, her cruel words slicing through Rebecca like a knife. Rebecca felt the heat rise in her cheeks as laughter rippled through the saloon. 35 wasn't ancient by any means, but in 1878 Wyoming territory, an unmarried woman her age was considered well past her prime. The cruel nickname Old Maid Patterson had followed her for years now, a painful reminder of opportunities lost and a future uncertain. "That'll be docked from your pay," Mabel added sharply, hands on her hips. "I apologize, Mrs. Turner. I'll clean it right away," Rebecca replied softly, already bending to gather the larger shards of glass. The saloon door swung open with a creak, allowing a shaft of sunlight to pierce the smoky interior. A tall figure stood silhouetted in the doorway, the distinct outline of a cowboy hat perched atop broad shoulders. As he stepped inside, the room fell silent. Rebecca hardly noticed, focused on her task and fighting back tears of humiliation. "Excuse me, madam," a deep voice said from above her. "Allow me to help you with that." Rebecca glanced up to see the stranger crouching beside her, his weathered hands already gathering glass fragments. His face was partially shadowed by his hat, but she could make out a strong jaw peppered with stubble and kind eyes the color of a summer sky. "That's not necessary, sir," she murmured, embarrassed. "No trouble at all," he replied with a gentle smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "Name's Xavier Zimmerman, just arrived in town." "Rebecca Patterson," she replied automatically, "and you shouldn't waste your kindness on me, Mr. Zimmerman. I'm just the laundress." Xavier's eyes met hers, and something in his steady gaze made her breath catch. "No kindness is ever wasted, Miss Patterson." Mabel's shrill voice interrupted the moment. "If you're done flirting with the help, Cowboy, what can I get you?" Xavier stood and helped Rebecca to her feet before turning to Mabel. "A room for a few weeks, if you have one. And information about ranch work in these parts." As Rebecca slipped away to fetch a broom, she couldn't help but notice how Xavier Zimmerman commanded respect without demanding it. The other men in the saloon straightened slightly in his presence. There was something about him, a quiet strength, perhaps, that distinguished him from the usual drifters who passed through Sweetwater Springs. Later that evening, as Rebecca folded fresh linens in the back room, she heard Mabel gossiping with the cook. "That new fella Zimmerman, he's got money, I can tell." "Asked about the old Miller property on the North Creek," Mabel said excitedly. "But did you see him being sweet on Old Maid Patterson? Poor man must be desperate or blind." The cook's response was lost beneath their laughter, but the words stung nevertheless. Rebecca pressed her lips together and continued her work. She'd long since learned that dreams of romance were foolish for a woman like her. The next morning, Rebecca arrived early to start the day's washing. The Wyoming sun had barely crested the distant mountains, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold. She enjoyed these quiet moments before the town fully awakened. "Good morning, Miss Patterson," Rebecca started, nearly dropping her basket of soap flakes. Xavier Zimmerman stood a few feet away, already dressed for the day in a clean work shirt and denim pants. "Mr. Zimmerman," she acknowledged with a polite nod, trying to ignore the flutter in her chest. "You're up early." "Always have been," he replied, leaning against the doorframe. "Day breaks, so do I." His gaze lingered on her face. "Might I ask where a man could find a decent breakfast in this town?" "Mrs. Holloway's boarding house serves breakfast to non-residents for 25 cents, Rebecca replied. 2 blocks east, white house with blue shutters." "Would you care to join me?" he asked, the invitation so unexpected that Rebecca nearly laughed. "I have work to do, Mr. Zimmerman," she said, gesturing to the pile of linens. "Perhaps another time then," he said, tipping his hat before departing. Rebecca watched him walk away, puzzled by his interest. Men didn't invite her to breakfast, especially not handsome cowboys with sky-blue eyes and a voice like warm honey. Over the next week, Xavier made a point to greet Rebecca whenever their paths crossed. Small talk about the weather evolved into more personal conversations. She learned he was 39, had spent years working cattle drives across the territories, and was now looking to settle somewhere. He'd been born in Pennsylvania, fought briefly in the war between the states, and had an easy way with horses that bordered on magical. "They're honest creatures," he explained one afternoon as he helped her carry water buckets from the well. "They don't care about a man's past or his bank account. Just how he treats them." Rebecca found herself looking forward to these brief encounters, though she tried to temper her growing feelings. Experience had taught her that men's attention was usually fleeting, especially once they learned her story. One evening, as she walked home after a long day of washing and ironing, she spotted a group of local men harassing a young woman outside the telegraph office. The young woman, Sarah, the new telegraph operator who'd arrived from Chicago just weeks ago, looked terrified. Before Rebecca could intervene, Xavier appeared from the gunsmith shop. He didn't raise his voice or draw his weapon. He simply positioned himself between Sarah and the men, his stance making it clear that they would have to go through him first. "Evening, gentlemen," he said, his tone conversational but with an edge of steel. "Seems to me the lady isn't enjoying your company." The men grumbled but dispersed quickly. Rebecca had seen enough confrontations in Sweetwater Springs to know that most troublemakers were cowards at heart. Still, Xavier's quiet courage impressed her. After ensuring Sarah reached her lodging safely, Xavier spotted Rebecca across the street. He crossed over, falling into step beside her. "Escorting me home, Mr. Zimmerman?" she asked, trying to sound casual. "If you'll allow it," he replied. "And I'd be honored if you'd call me Xavier." They walked in companionable silence for a moment before Rebecca spoke. "That was kind of you, helping Miss Davis," Xavier shrugged. "My mother raised me to believe that true strength is measured by how we treat those who need protection, not by how much fear we can instill." "Your mother sounds like a wise woman." "She was," he said, a hint of sadness coloring his words. "Lost her 5 years ago." "I'm sorry," Rebecca said softly, understanding the pain of such loss all too well. They reached Rebecca's modest house at the edge of town, a small structure she'd inherited from her aunt. Lamplight glowed warmly through the curtains. Her younger sister Lily must be home already. "Would you like to come in for coffee?" Rebecca offered impulsively, then immediately regretted it. What would people say? An unmarried woman inviting a man into her home in the evening. To her surprise, Xavier shook his head. "I'd like that very much, but not tonight. People talk in small towns, and I wouldn't want to damage your reputation." His consideration touched her. "Thank you for walking me home, Xavier." He smiled at the sound of his name on her lips. "Good night, Rebecca." As she watched him walk away, Rebecca felt a dangerous hope blooming in her chest, one she quickly tried to squash. Men like Xavier didn't court women like her. It was just his nature to be kind to everyone. The following Sunday after church services, Rebecca and Lily were enjoying a rare afternoon off, sitting on their front porch. Lily, at 19, was everything Rebecca wasn't: vivacious, carefree, and beautiful in an uncomplicated way that turned heads throughout town. "He's looking at you again," Lily whispered, nudging her sister. Rebecca followed her gaze to see Xavier leaning against a hitching post across the street, talking with the blacksmith. As if sensing her attention, he glanced up and tipped his hat. "He's just being polite," Rebecca insisted, though her heart said otherwise. "No man looks at a woman just being polite the way he looks at you," Lily countered. "Why don't you believe he might be interested?" "Because men don't court 35-year-old laundresses when there are plenty of younger, prettier options," Rebecca replied practically. Lily rolled her eyes. "You're not ancient, Becca, and you're beautiful. You've just convinced yourself otherwise because of what happened with James." Rebecca flinched at the mention of her former fiancé. 12 years ago, James Franklin had left her at the altar, running off with a wealthy merchant's daughter just days before their wedding. The humiliation had nearly broken her, forcing her to leave their hometown in Missouri and start anew in Wyoming territory with Lily in tow. "This isn't about James," Rebecca said firmly, though they both knew it partly was. Later that week, Rebecca received word that Xavier had purchased the old Miller ranch. The property had been abandoned for years after the Miller family moved to California, but it had good water access and fertile grazing land. The news confirmed that Xavier intended to stay in Sweetwater Springs permanently. On Saturday morning, Rebecca was hanging laundry behind the saloon when Xavier appeared, leading his horse. He was dressed differently today, a clean black coat over a white shirt, polished boots, and a new hat. "Good morning," he greeted, looking uncharacteristically nervous. "Morning," she replied, noticing his formal appearance. "You look like you're heading to a wedding." "Nothing so formal," he said with a smile. "I was wondering if you might join me for a picnic this afternoon. I'd like to show you the Miller that is my property." The invitation took her by surprise. "A picnic? I've packed food," he said, patting his saddlebag. "Nothing fancy, but Mrs. Holloway helped me put it together." Rebecca hesitated, glancing at her half-finished laundry. "I've already spoken with Mrs. Turner," Xavier added quickly. "She's agreed to let you have the afternoon off." "You spoke to Mrs. Turner?" Rebecca couldn't hide her shock. Mabel Turner never willingly gave employees time off. Xavier looked slightly embarrassed. "I may have paid her for the inconvenience." The gesture was so unexpectedly thoughtful that Rebecca found herself agreeing before she could overthink it. An hour later, Rebecca sat behind Xavier on his horse, her arms tentatively encircling his waist as they rode north out of town. She was acutely aware of the curious stares they'd received while departing, but the fresh air and open countryside soon made her forget her worries. Xavier's property was even more beautiful than she remembered. The small farmhouse needed repairs, but the land was lush with spring grass and a clear creek wound through a stand of cottonwoods. He helped her dismount near the trees and spread a blanket on the grass. "It's not much yet," he said, gesturing to the dilapidated house, "but I have plans." "It's lovely," Rebecca replied honestly. "There's so much potential here." They shared a simple meal of bread, cheese, and dried fruit while Xavier outlined his vision for the ranch. He wanted to raise horses primarily, with some cattle for steady income. "I've spent my life working other men's land," he explained. "It's time I built something of my own." "It's a good dream," she said softly. Xavier studied her face. "What about your dreams, Rebecca?" The question caught her off guard. No one had asked about her dreams in years. I suppose I stopped dreaming big dreams a long time ago." "Why?" His direct question held no judgment, only genuine curiosity. Rebecca looked away, watching a hawk circle overhead. "Dreams lead to disappointment. I learned that lesson thoroughly." Xavier was quiet for a moment. "Someone hurt you badly?" It wasn't a question, but Rebecca nodded anyway. Haltingly, she told him about James, about the humiliation and heartbreak, about fleeing to Wyoming to escape the pitying glances and whispered gossip. "I was 23 then," she concluded. "Young enough to start over, but the experience changed me, made me cautious. And now I'm considered an old maid, too set in my ways for marriage." "Who considers you that?" Xavier asked, a hint of anger in his voice. Rebecca gave a hollow laugh. "Everyone, it's just how things are. Women my age without husbands are what? Less valuable, less worthy of love." Xavier shook his head firmly. "That's nonsense, Rebecca." "It's reality," she countered. Xavier reached out, hesitantly taking her hand in his. "May I tell you something? I was engaged once too, about 7 years ago. Clara was a rancher's daughter in Montana Territory. We were to be married in the spring, but she fell ill with pneumonia that winter." His voice grew softer. "I lost her in a matter of days." "I'm so sorry," Rebecca whispered, squeezing his hand. "For years after, I threw myself into work, moving from ranch to ranch, never staying anywhere long enough to form attachments," he continued. "Then last year, something changed. I realized I was tired of running, tired of being alone. His blue eyes met hers. "When I first saw you in that saloon, something about you called to me. Your dignity, your kindness despite Mabel's cruelty." Rebecca shook her head, disbelieving. "You feel sorry for me." "No," he said firmly. "I admire you. There's a strength in you that draws me, Rebecca. And if you'll permit me, I'd like to court you properly." Her heart hammered in her chest. "People will talk. They'll say unkind things about you for choosing someone like me." Xavier's laugh was warm and genuine. "Let them talk. I've never much cared for others' opinions on matters that are none of their business." As spring turned to summer, Xavier courted Rebecca with a quiet determination that gradually broke down her defenses. They rode to his ranch on Sundays after church, where he worked steadily to make the farmhouse habitable. Rebecca found herself offering suggestions for the kitchen layout or the placement of windows, and Xavier implemented every idea as though her opinions were precious to him. In town, Xavier made no secret of his intentions. He escorted Rebecca to church, carried her laundry baskets, and once confronted a drunken cowboy who had made a disparaging remark about old maid Patterson. The confrontation hadn't turned violent. Xavier simply towered over the man until an apology was grudgingly offered, but word spread quickly. Sweetwater Springs buzzed with gossip. Some found the courtship charming, others scandalous. Mabel Turner was particularly vocal in her disapproval. "He'll tire of you," she warned Rebecca one morning. "Men like him don't settle for women like you unless they're desperate." The words stung, playing into Rebecca's deepest insecurities. That evening, as Xavier walked her home, she was unusually quiet. "Something's troubling you," he observed, his hand warm against the small of her back. Rebecca sighed. "Just tired of the gossip." "Is that all?" Xavier stopped walking, turning to face her. "Or are you starting to believe what they're saying?" She couldn't meet his eyes. "Why did you choose me, Xavier? Truly, there are younger women in town who would gladly have you." "Look at me," he said gently. When she did, he continued, "I didn't choose you despite your age or your past. Those things are part of who you are, the woman I've come to care for deeply." He took her hands in his. "The truth is, Rebecca Patterson, you're exactly the woman I've been waiting for my entire life. Someone genuine, kind, resilient. Someone who understands loss but hasn't let it embitter her." His voice dropped lower. "Someone whose smile makes me feel like I've come home after a lifetime of wandering." Tears pricked Rebecca's eyes. "I'm afraid," she admitted. "Afraid to hope, to believe this is real." "Then let me prove it to you," he replied. "Day by day, for as long as it takes." As summer waned, Xavier's ranch house transformation neared completion. He hired local men for the heavy work, but did much of the finishing himself, planing floorboards until they were smooth, crafting shelves and cabinets from local pine, painting walls in colors Rebecca had once mentioned liking. One evening in late August, Xavier invited Rebecca and Lily to dinner at the ranch. When they arrived, Rebecca gasped in delight. The house glowed with lamplight and the front porch was decorated with wildflowers. Inside, the transformation was complete. Curtains hung at the windows, a sturdy table stood in the dining room, and a piano occupied one corner of the parlor. "Where did you get a piano?" Rebecca asked, amazed. "Had it shipped from Denver," Xavier replied, looking pleased at her reaction. "You mentioned once that your mother taught you to play." The thoughtfulness of the gesture overwhelmed her. No one had ever listened to her casual reminiscences with such care, such attention to detail. After dinner, while Lily explored the garden, Xavier led Rebecca to the parlor. The room was simply but beautifully furnished, with a comfortable sofa facing a stone fireplace. "This feels like a real home," Rebecca said softly, running her fingers over the polished mantelpiece. "It's missing something essential," Xavier replied, his voice unusually solemn. When she turned questioningly, he was down on one knee before her, a small wooden box in his hand. Rebecca's breath caught in her throat. "I know we haven't known each other long by some standards," he began, "but in my heart, I feel I've been searching for you my whole life." He opened the box to reveal a delicate gold ring with a small pearl. "Rebecca Patterson, would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife?" For a moment, Rebecca couldn't speak past the emotion clogging her throat. All her doubts and fears rose up. What if he changed his mind? What if this was a terrible mistake? What if— But looking into Xavier's earnest blue eyes, she found her answer. "Yes," she whispered, then more strongly, "yes, I will marry you." His smile was radiant as he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as though it had been made for her. Standing, he cupped her face gently and kissed her, their first kiss, tender and reverent and full of promise. The wedding took place in October, just as the aspen trees turned golden. To Rebecca's surprise, nearly the entire town attended. Even Mabel Turner came, though she sniffed disapprovingly through the ceremony. Rebecca wore a simple cream dress that Lily had helped her make, with lace salvaged from their mother's wedding gown. Xavier, standing tall and proud in a new black suit, looked at her with such undisguised adoration that she finally, fully believed in the reality of his love. The local minister, speaking the traditional vows, seemed to place special emphasis on "until death do you part." As though acknowledging the journey that had brought them both to this moment, two people who had known loss and loneliness, now finding in each other a second chance at happiness. Rebecca moved into the ranch house that same day. That night, as they lay together in the moonlit bedroom, Xavier traced gentle fingers across her cheek. "Happy, Mrs. Zimmerman?" he asked softly. "More than I ever thought possible," she replied truthfully. "Though I still sometimes wonder what you see in me." Xavier propped himself up on one elbow, his expression serious. "Shall I tell you?" At her nod, he continued. "I see a woman who carries herself with dignity even when others try to diminish her. I see someone who has known heartbreak but still has the courage to love again. I see strength in how you raised your sister, in how you built a life for yourself against considerable odds." He kissed her gently. "And yes, I see beauty in your eyes that reveal such depth of feeling, in your hands that work so diligently, in your smile that you give so sparingly that each one feels like a gift." Rebecca felt tears well up. "I love you, Xavier Zimmerman." "And I love you, Rebecca Zimmerman," he replied, the new name making her smile, "until my last breath and beyond." Life as a rancher's wife suited Rebecca better than she could have imagined. She kept a vegetable garden, learned to make cheese from the milk of their 3 cows, and gradually turned the house into a true home. In the evenings, she sometimes played the piano while Xavier sat nearby, whittling or reading. They talked of everything and nothing: dreams, memories, books, the day's small victories and challenges. Winter came, bringing snow that transformed the landscape into a glittering wonderland. On Christmas morning, Rebecca woke to find Xavier watching her, a tender expression on his face. "What is it?" she asked sleepily. "Just thinking how different my life was a year ago," he replied. "How empty." She reached up to touch his face. "Not empty anymore." "No," he agreed, kissing her palm, "very much full." He hesitated, then added, "though perhaps it could be fuller still." Rebecca raised an eyebrow questioningly. "I've been thinking," Xavier said carefully, "about children. I know we haven't discussed it much, and if you don't want, I do want," she interrupted softly. At 36, Rebecca had resigned herself to never having children. Now the possibility filled her with nervous excitement. Very much. The joy that spread across Xavier's face was answer enough, but he gathered her close anyway, whispering promises against her hair. Spring brought new life to the ranch calves, foals, and the first tentative green shoots in Rebecca's garden. It also brought morning sickness that confirmed their Christmas wishes were coming true. Dr. Harrison, examining Rebecca in early April, pronounced her in excellent health. "Many women have their first child in their 30s, Mrs. Zimmerman. You're strong and healthy. I foresee no complications." Still, the pregnancy wasn't easy. Rebecca suffered through hot summer days, feeling ungainly and uncomfortable. Xavier was unfailingly supportive, taking on extra household tasks without being asked and reading every book on childbirth and infant care he could obtain. On a crisp October day, Almost exactly a year after their wedding, Rebecca gave birth to a daughter they named Clara Rose, honoring both Xavier's first love and Rebecca's mother. The baby had Xavier's blue eyes and a dusting of dark hair that promised to be as rich brown as Rebecca's. Holding her daughter for the first time, Rebecca felt a completeness she hadn't known was missing. Xavier sat beside them on the bed, one arm around his wife, one finger caught in his daughter's tiny fist. "She's perfect," he whispered, voice thick with emotion. "She is," Rebecca agreed, then looked up at him with a smile. "Our little miracle." As autumn turned to winter once more, Rebecca often found herself reflecting on the strange, winding path that had led her to this happiness. The heartbreak of her youth, the years of loneliness, even Mabel Turner's cruelty all had somehow led her here, to this cozy home filled with love. One evening, as snow fell softly outside, Rebecca nursed Clara by the fire while Xavier read aloud from a book of poetry. The domesticity of the scene struck her suddenly how ordinary yet extraordinary it was to have found this contentment after believing it forever beyond her reach. "What are you thinking?" Xavier asked, noticing her faraway expression. "About how wrong everyone was," she replied. "They said I was too old for love, that my chance had passed." She looked down at their daughter, then up at the man who had changed everything. "But you were right all along." "About what?" he asked, setting aside his book. "When you said I was the woman you had waited a lifetime for," she answered. "Perhaps that's why it took so long. We were both becoming the people who could recognize and cherish each other when we finally met." Xavier crossed the room to kneel beside her chair, one hand cradling their daughter's head, the other taking Rebecca's free hand. "Worth every moment of waiting," he said simply. "Every mile traveled, every lonely night, every false start and disappointment, all of it led me to you, to this." Rebecca leaned forward to kiss him gently. "No more waiting now," she whispered against his lips. "Just living." Outside, the snow continued to fall, blanketing their ranch in pristine white. Inside, the fire crackled, the baby dozed, and two people who had once believed love had passed them by held fast to the precious second chance. They'd found in each other proof that it's never too late to find the love of a lifetime.